We like to think that our beliefs are solid, right? And that our actions, like casting a vote, are just a reflection of those beliefs. But what if we have that completely backwards? What if the physical act of voting doesn't just express what you believe? What if it actually, literally, changes it? I mean, think about it for a second. We have all been there. You get a new phone and you quickly realize the battery life is just awful. Or you vote for a candidate and they immediately do something that makes you cringe. And yet, what do? We find ourselves jumping to defend them. So why do we work so hard to justify a choice that we know isn't perfect? Well, the classic example is a smoker. They know the health risks, they've seen all the warnings, but that knowledge totally clashes with the act of smoking. So to get rid of that mental friction, they'll rationalize. They'll say, oh, it helps with my stress, or I'll quit next year, for sure. See? They're not changing their behavior, they're changing their thinking, so the behavior feels okay. This feeling, this internal battle, it isn't just some random quirk of being human. It actually has a name, and it happens to be one of the most powerful ideas in all of social psychology. It's called cognitive dissonance. The idea comes from a psychologist named Leon Festinger way back in 1957, and the core of it is this: our brains absolutely crave consistency. When our actions and our beliefs don't line up, it creates this psychological static, this real discomfort. And just like being hungry drives you to find food, this dissonance drives us to find a way to make the conflict go away. So how do we do it? How do we resolve this conflict? Well, there are basically three ways. Option one, change your behavior. The smoker actually quits. Okay. Option two, change your belief. Convince yourself smoking isn't really that bad. Or there's option three, the one we go for most of the time. Just justify it. Rationalize it. Our brains are kind of wired to take the path of least resistance. And let's be honest, changing your mind is often a whole lot easier than changing your actions. Okay, so let's see how this whole thing plays out when we're not just talking about a habit, but a specific choice we've really committed to. It's kind of amazing what our brains do the second after we've made a decision. Once we commit, we unconsciously start to puff up all the good things about our choice, while at the same time, we focus on all the bad things about the options we said no to. Psychologists have a great name for this. They call it spreading the alternatives. We're literally pushing the options further apart in our heads to make ourselves feel better and more certain about the path we took. There's a fantastic old experiment that shows just how powerful this is. Researchers had some women go through a really severe and embarrassing initiation to join a group, while others had a super mild one. Here's the twist. The group itself was designed to be incredibly, mind-numbingly boring. So what happened? The women who went through the severe initiation rated the dull group discussion as being way more interesting and valuable. Their brains just couldn't handle the thought, I went through all that for this? So, to resolve the dissonance, they changed their belief. You know what? This group must actually be great. So if a little bit of embarrassment can completely change our opinion of a boring group, what happens when the stakes are way higher? What happens when the action is casting a vote? This is the exact question that a researcher at Erasmus University wanted to answer. He designed this really clever experiment to separate the simple act of preferring a candidate from the physical act of voting for one, to see if that action, all by itself, has a measurable effect on our political attitudes. Now, this diagram might look a little complicated, but the core idea is actually super simple. They got over 400 people and randomly assigned them to different groups. Everybody got to rate 2 candidates, but here's the key difference, right there in the middle. Some of the groups were then told to actually cast a vote, while the other groups weren't. That randomization is absolutely crucial because it lets us isolate the effect of the vote itself. Okay, so after they made their choice, either just by stating it or by voting, the subjects got hit with some pretty challenging news stories. These were designed specifically to create cognitive dissonance. Some people read something really negative about the candidate they just picked. Others read something really positive about the candidate they rejected. The big question was, how would their minds handle this new conflicting information? And the results are, well, they're incredibly revealing about how our brains go into protection mode to defend the choices we've made. First things first, a quick sanity check to make sure the experiment was even working. And yep, it was. The data shows that the participants, who were mostly left of center, overwhelmingly voted for the left-wing candidate. And more than 96% of people who voted for the person they said they preferred. So everything's working as expected. And here it is. This is the big one. After reading that challenging news, the people who had only stated a preference were actually willing to adjust their opinions. But the group that had physically voted, their opinions were much, much stickier. That act of casting a ballot made them significantly less likely to change their minds, even when they were staring powerful new information right in the face. And the effect was especially strong for voters who read something good about their opponent. It was just harder for them to accept that the other side might actually have some good qualities after they had formally committed. Their brain was already hard at work spreading the alternatives. To put a number on it, the effect size was 0.28. Now that might seem kind of small, but you have to remember, this was just a hypothetical lab scenario. Finding a clear causal effect of this size in a controlled experiment is actually a pretty big deal. It tells us the effect is real. But here's where it got really interesting. For the negative news story, that voting effect only really showed up for people who found the news genuinely upsetting. This shows that cognitive dissonance is the engine here. If the new information doesn't really bother you, your brain doesn't need to do any work to defend your choice. But when it does bother you, that's when the act of voting really locks your opinion in place. So the most important point is this. Because it was a randomized experiment, we can get past just saying these things are correlated. We can actually point to causation. The act of voting itself appears to cause us to become more resistant to changing our political minds. And when you take this small internal psychological process and you zoom all the way out, you realize the implications for our society are massive. Think of it like this. Before you vote, your mind might be more open. You see some new information and you think, okay, that makes me question my choice a bit. But after you've cast that ballot, the psychology completely shifts. Your brain's new job isn't to evaluate, it's to defend. That new information isn't seen as something to consider anymore, it's an attack to be defeated. And this is where a small internal process has huge external consequences. Our individual psychological need to feel consistent doesn't just stay inside our own heads. When you multiply that tiny effect by millions and millions of voters, all of them unconsciously working to justify their one choice, it becomes a powerful, relentless engine of political polarization. Which leaves us with a really challenging question, one that goes way beyond politics. If the simple act of making a choice can actually reshape what you hold to be true, what choice are you defending right now? Maybe without even realizing it.